For most of the United States, winter means at least the slight risk of snow. And if you think your area is immune because it's in the southern US, contemplate the fact that in 1977, it actually snowed in South Florida. That snowstorm only lasted a little over an hour, and the snow melted away almost immediately. So no one in Miami should be investing in snow boots and shovels anytime soon. Other parts of the country, however, are at greater risk of having daily life interrupted by heavy snow. And while any major snowstorm has the potential to disrupt your life, damage your property, and make you hate winter, sometimes Mother Nature conspires to whip up a storm powerful enough to make some dark, unfortunate history. That's because winter storms carry some unique threats. Heavy snow reduces visibility and traction on roads, causing accidents. Wet snow is difficult to shovel and can cause heart attacks even in relatively healthy people. And several feet of snow can shut down entire areas of the country, making it nearly impossible to deliver supplies or get emergency vehicles out in response to disasters. In other words, winter storms are dangerous. Here are some stories about worst winter storms in US history. But before we get started, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. This is Smart Stories channel. We tell stories that make you think. The Great Blizzard of 1888, 58 inches, 400 deaths. According to the Washington Post, in early March 1888, the weather conspired to produce what remains the most severe blizzard ever experienced by the northeastern US. Low pressure, high winds, and heavy snow saw the temperature drop to 6 degrees in New York City. The storm moved slowly and even paused for a while in a holding pattern, merely dumping snow for nearly 2 days. Weather Underground calls the blizzard of 1888 the deadliest, snowiest, and most unusual winter storm in US history. Winds rose to 50 miles per hour, telegraph lines went down, cutting New York City off from communications, and trains derailed. Hundreds of people died in New York alone, many later found buried under several feet of snow. According to history, over 400 people died as a direct result of the storm. Snowfall was legendary. In Saratoga Springs, in northern New York, they recorded 58 inches of snow, and parts of New York City measured as much as 36 inches of snow. WGBH reports that in Boston, many of the streets' cars were simply abandoned, as the snow fell so quickly the roads became impassable. As a direct result of the ensuing disaster, Boston began planning the country's first underground transit system, what we think of today as the subway. It opened in 1897, just 9 years after the storm. The Schoolhouse Blizzard of 1888, 6 inches, 200 deaths. The year 1888 was a bad one for snowstorms. A few weeks before the legendary Great Blizzard of 1888, the Washington Post reports that a schoolhouse blizzard slammed into America's Midwest, killing more than 200 people. What made this storm especially terrifying was the fact that not a lot of snow fell, only about 6 inches. It was the brutal temperatures, incredibly high winds, and the timing of the storm that made it so deadly. January 1888 experienced one of the worst cold snaps in the area's history. Missoula, Montana, recorded a temperature of minus 42 degrees, and Poplar River, Montana, recorded an astounding minus 56.8 degrees. As noted by AP News, the snowstorm itself hit on the afternoon of January 12, just as hundreds of children were leaving their small schools in the area. The snow was whipped up by the fierce winds, and combined with the incredibly low temperatures, many teachers and children became confused and were trapped in the open plains without shelter. Another reason the blizzard was so deadly was the element of surprise. As noted by MinPost, earlier in the day the temperatures had been unreasonably warm enough to melt the snow already on the ground. As a result, few people took any precautions or worried about the coming storm appropriately. The death toll is estimated to be between 250 and 500. most of them schoolchildren. The Snow King Blizzard of 1899, 30 inches, 100 deaths. The Great Blizzard of 1899 is known as the Snow King Blizzard, which gives you some idea of how bad it was. Spoiler alert, it was bad. History reports that February 1899 is the second coldest February on record in the United States. Many normally warm areas experienced surprisingly low temperatures. San Diego dropped to 33 degrees. South Texas had wind chills that went as low as minus 40 degrees. And Tallahassee, Florida, woke up to minus 2 degrees on February 13, 1899. Many of these temperatures remain all-time records. Meanwhile, other areas of the country saw terrifyingly low temperatures with wind chills in the Midwest approaching minus 100 degrees. While the southern US dealt with unusual cold, further north, the snow started to fall. It snowed continuously for 51 hours in Washington, D.C., eventually leaving 21 inches of snow behind, while winds as high as 60 miles per hour battered the infrastructure. The storm dumped plenty of snow all over the northeastern US. Farmer's Almanac reports that Cape May, New Jersey, measured 34 inches. The storm was so fierce, more than 100 deaths are attributed to it. Incredibly, a few days after the storm ended, temperatures swung wildly higher. In Washington, D.C., it hit 61 degrees by mid-February, and by the end of the month, the record snows had mostly melted away. The Knickerbocker Storm of 1922, 28 inches, 98 deaths. The deadly blizzard that dumped more than 2 feet of snow on Washington, D.C. and its surroundings in 1922 is unique in one horrifying aspect. All of the fatalities associated with the storm occurred in one place, the Knickerbocker Theater. The Washington Post reports that the storm moved very slowly, with a weather pattern in the north stopping it from advancing. As a result, it lingered over the DC area, dumping snow on the region. On the second day of the storm, the theater welcomed a crowd of about 900 people to watch the movie Get Rich Quick Wallingford. A film, Smithsonian Magazine notes, is now lost, with no prints in existence. Despite the fact that the theater was relatively new, it had been opened just 5 years before 1917. The roof couldn't handle the snow load. The theater had been built quickly and cheaply, and the steel beams, meant to support the roof, were inserted very shallowly into the walls. The weight of the snow caused the roof to essentially drop like a pancake onto the people trapped below, midway through the film without warning. The collapse killed 98 people and injured 133. When the dust cleared, no one was found legally responsible because the theater actually met all building codes at the time. But the disaster did lead to major changes in those codes to make future buildings safer. The Great Appalachian Storm of 1950, 62 inches, 383 deaths. Also known as the Great Thanksgiving Storm, these monstrous blizzards smack into the eastern United States beginning on November 24, 1950, and did immense damage. What made this storm so dangerous was the combination of its rapid development and the hurricane-force winds that accompanied the snowfall. Wind gusts as high as 140 miles per hour were recorded during the storm, which gives a whole new definition to the phrase whiteout conditions. Strangely, this was a storm of extremes. While some areas, such as Mount Mitchell, North Carolina, saw several feet of snow and frigid temperatures as low as minus 26 degrees, other areas had high winds but relatively high temperatures, like Buffalo, New York, which reached 50 degrees, but was also buffeted by 50 miles per hour winds. Weather Underground notes the blizzard was monumental in terms of snowfall and has the highest snowfall index rating of any tracked storm in the region to date. These resulted in some eye-popping snowfall figures, like more than 63 inches of snow in West Virginia and 44 inches in Steubenville, Ohio. The wild weather is blamed for as many as 383 deaths and did about $66,700,000 in damage in 1950 dollars, which would be more than $800 million adjusted for inflation. It was the costliest storm ever recorded at the time, and remains one of the worst to ever hit the US. The Great Storm of 1975, 24 inches, 58 deaths. This legendary storm is often referred to as the Super Bowl blizzard because it hit large swaths of the US just a few days before the Minnesota Vikings and Pittsburgh Steelers competed for the NFL championship in New Orleans. The storm produced a ton of snow, with Time noting that in some places the winds created drifts of snow 20 feet high. But what made this storm unique and uniquely deadly was the large number of tornadoes it produced. When the storm finally passed, 45 tornadoes had raged through the American Southeast, while the northern parts of the country dealt with heavy snow. Some in the Midwestern US call the snow an Arctic hurricane, which gives you some idea of its ferocity. The storm eventually dropped about 2 feet of snow on the country. Between the snow, cold, and tornadoes, the death toll reached 58 people. But the storm also killed thousands of animals as livestock was caught in its fury. Damage was estimated at more than $60 million, which would be nearly $350 million adjusted for inflation. No wonder folks in the Midwest usually refer to this one as the storm of the century. The storm of the century in 1993, 56 inches, 318 deaths. You know, when a storm is referred to as the storm of the century, it was really bad. The storm, which swept up from the Gulf of Mexico and intensified faster than anyone could have imagined, was so intense that many meteorologists initially thought their instruments must be malfunctioning. The 1993 superstorm had a bigger negative impact than almost any other weather event in the 20th century. The storm caused chaos even before it reached full power on the mainland. The Coast Guard had to reduce more than 100 folks from their ships when the storm hit land on March 13. From there, things got worse and worse as the storm moved north, combining with a cold front to deliver record-setting snow totals. The Florida Panhandle, not known for its snowfall, registered 6 inches according to the National Centers of Environmental Protection, and Mount LeConte, Tennessee, found itself buried under 60 inches of the white stuff. The storm left 2.5 million people in the dark without electricity, or in many cases heat, and wound up killing 318 people. The cost of the storm damage has been estimated at an eye-watering $11.3 billion, which made it the most damaging winter storm in American history until 2021, when the severe cold wave in February of that year surpassed it. The Snowzilla storm of 2016, 42 inches, 55 deaths. According to the Washington Post, there's a good reason the 2016 winter storm that slammed into the eastern United States in January is unaffectionately known as Snowzilla. In some areas, as much as 40 inches of snow was recorded, and snow totals over 20 inches were common. The storm set the record for the most snow dropped on New York City, when a whopping 27.5 inches was measured in Central Park. As noted by the National Weather Service, the storm was unusual in that a period of unseasonably warm weather immediately preceded it. Christmas Day saw temperatures in Baltimore over 70 degrees. Then the storm began developing slowly, bringing some snow and freezing rain the week of January 17, with temperatures dropping steadily. On January 22, the storm shifted into high gear. WSET News reports that at its height, it stretched across 450,000 square miles and affected 100 million people, with snow recorded as far south as the Florida Panhandle. As noted by Popular Mechanics, the combination of deep snow, high winds, and strong storm surges led 12 states and Washington, D.C. to declare a state of emergency, and left 55 people dead in its wake. This was the last story for today. Mention in the comments what other snowstorms in the United States do you remember. We'll be happy to read them. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. See you soon.